You may not get to everything that you want to in a particular day, but over the long haul, if you sort of stick with it and do your best every day, you're probably going to end up with a career that you can be really proud of.
We recognize genius wherever it exists. And if you're known by the company you keep, we are proud to not only spotlight the women that are part of Rockefeller Capital Management's unique network, but also welcome our brilliant audience members.
Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Esposito, head of Rockefeller's Enterprise Client Coverage Group, and welcome back to Genius Loves Company. Everyone has a story to tell, and we're excited to hear those from some of Rockefeller's top private advisors, investors, and senior leaders about the life and career experiences that got them here and the insights and perspectives they've gained. Joining us today is Ashley McCarthy, the co-chief legal officer at Rockefeller Capital Management. Ashley has been an integral part of our firm since its inception in 2018 and has played a major role in the milestones of the firm since. She provides essential legal advice and guidance while also overseeing our legal operations. We're so excited to have her on the Genius Loves Company podcast.
Thank you so much, Laura, and I'm so excited to be here with you.
Okay, since you've been a longtime listener of the show, you know how these things go, but we always like to start at the beginning, to truly understand how our guests, how you got to where you are now, and what's shaped your journey along the way. So let's dive right into your roots. Tell us, where did you grow up?
So I was born and raised in a town called Blauvelt, New York, which is in Rockland County, across the Hudson River from better known Westchester County.
Right.
And my sister and I, went from kindergarten through 12th grade there, had what I think of as the sort of classic suburban experience. So it was night swimming, it was middle school dances, it was Little League games. You think of television shows like The Wonder Years, Boy Meets World, which we grew up watching, was also very much what our childhood felt like.
It sounds so idyllic. Rockland County, is it Jersey or is it New York?
So it's sort of right in the sweet spot there. As we always used to say, we got our gas in Jersey, so we didn't have to pump it, right? New Jersey has.
Oh my God,
that was
absolutely.
a big perk, right? But you're sort of nestled there off the Palisades Parkway. Just like I said, really a classic suburb.
Same school, kindergarten to 12th grade. I cringe at that. Tell me about that experience.
It's funny. For us, I think it was a great experience. And that section of Rockland County in particular has a lot of socioeconomic diversity. And so because our school district was set up such that you stayed with the same kids from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade, which is also unique within the public school system. Usually kids will move around different elementary schools that feed into one middle school. Here we were all together. And so
how many kids in a class?
In individual classrooms, probably the typical 20. In our grade, there were about 200 kids.
Okay.
And so we moved from K to 12 together. And very early on, you were making friendships with people, without really regard to which part of town they were from. And you had a very artsy, affluent community where there were people like Al Pacino. They wanted homes outside of Manhattan. They settled there and raised their children there, and their kids came through public schools with us, down to sections of the county that were more blue-collar workers and electricians and plumbers. And so you had their children mixing together with these Hollywood actors and Broadway, musicians, all growing up together. And I think for us, it let us understand from an early age that what really defines people is what are their passions, what are their interests.
Does the school still exist today?
Because
it is so unique. In a public school system, I don't think I've ever heard of that.
It does still exist.
Yeah.
So Tappan Zee High School.
Okay.
And in fact, they tried to change the structure of the school when I was in high school. And I was one of the people who testified to the Board of Ed as to why I thought it was so important, because I had this incredible experience.
Law career is now coming into focus.
That's right. So that was an early example of really advocating for something that I thought was so important.
All right. Well, we're going to put a pin in that because I am so curious about how you ended up going to law school. But first, how did your family really shape your aspirations and your goals? You've referenced your mother working outside of the home.
Yes. So while my sister and I had this classic suburban upbringing, that was certainly not the experience for my parents and my mom in particular. So my mom grew up in a house with very limited financial opportunity. Neither of her parents had attended high school, which was not uncommon for, their peers at the time. And she had grown up was born in the South Bronx and then ultimately grew up in a section of the Bronx called Throgs Neck. Her dad was a welder, and the work would sometimes come and go. He worked on building the Throgs Neck Bridge, but when that project was complete, you sometimes didn't know, when the work was going to come. She was one of 4 kids.
Yeah.
But I think really had it instilled in she and her siblings that education and hard work were going to be their ticket out of their circumstances. And that was something that their parents really emphasized. And I think from a very young age, she had that sort of almost desperate work ethic of somebody who is trying to change their circumstances and ensure that her future children were going to grow up with financial security and access to opportunity that would have been just beyond comprehension
unfathomable to her.
Exactly. And so she and my dad were high school sweethearts. The two of them, multiple jobs each, kind of just pounding away and preparing the groundwork to move from the Bronx to the suburbs, ultimately have me. They moved into the house 2 months before I was born. And we just grew up in an environment where it was sort of, it was like saying the sky was blue to say that you work hard. It was so ingrained in our household. We were aware of the fact that most of the other moms did not work outside the home in that community at that time.
So did both your parents work outside the home?
They did. So they both commuted into Manhattan every day, into, white collar jobs in Midtown and downtown. They worked kind of all over this city at different points in their careers. And that was what we grew up understanding kind of life to be. And so it wasn't anything that was unusual to us. I think for other young girls growing up in that community at that time, it would have been more unusual. And if you asked many of them today, well, who did you look up to? Many of them would cite my mom. She was sort of the woman in that community who was leaving work, and leaving home in business attire, heading to work in the city, coming to our basketball or softball games, on a BlackBerry finally, when BlackBerries came out by the time I was in high school, sort of tapping away on that. And I just always remember being very proud of that, and also just would not have been able to conceive of an adult life for myself that was ordered around anything other than hard work and prioritizing really short-term sacrifice in service of long-term achievement and security, which is what my parents did for us our whole lives.
In what professions were your parents in? You said both white collar.
Yeah, so my dad was an accountant.
Okay.
And he had started his career at Price Waterhouse and then, interestingly, ultimately moved into law firms. So he spent most of his career as the controller for different law firms here in the city.
Okay.
And then my mom started in 1975 as a management trainee at Empire Blue Cross Blue Shield, the health insurance company. She spent almost 50 years there.
Oh my
through
God.
all the different iterations of that company. It was a nonprofit when she started. They ultimately went for profit when I was in high school. At that point, she was the chief operating officer through the IPO. To watch her go from management trainee to ultimately, the different leadership roles that she held there.
These senior executive roles.
And for me,
Did she talk about it, or was it?
She talked about work. So there were definitely lessons that I learned, watching her navigate different issues at work. Whether it was things like being passed over for a promotion, that she really wanted. I think those had more of an impact on me than some of the triumphs that she had or some of the successes that she had in her career. I remember there was a promotion that she wanted. She did not get it at the time. I would have been in high school. And I remember thinking, I wonder if she's going to walk away. I knew she was disappointed and that she had already spent many years at that company. And instead, what I saw was her work harder than I had ever seen her work. She had already been pounding so hard. And all of a sudden it was, I'd wake up and our school started early in the morning. And by, 6 in the morning, I'm saying to my dad, where's mom? And it's, oh, she left an hour ago. Or, she was just on a mission. And I think dug in and started just punching harder than ever and trying to deliver even beyond the high bar that she had already set for herself. And within a couple of years, the job ultimately was hers. And so I took from that, the lesson of when you have those moments, both professionally and personally, and you are on the ropes, you can throw the towel or you can, compose yourself and move to the center of the ring and just start punching.
I love that. Oh my gosh, that's extraordinary.
She is an extraordinary person.
So the inevitable question of when you're a child, what do you want to be when you grow up? How did Ashley, the young child, answer that question? And I'm sure then it evolved over time, the answer.
I think that's right. I think like many kids who are achievers, and who are strivers, even for whatever that means when you're 7 or 8 years old, latch on to sort of prototypical successful careers, right? I want to be a doctor. I want to be a lawyer. I want to be an engineer, And so I probably went through phases of all of those things, but never with any kind of real intention. I then went to high school, right, and loved, literature, and had a period where I thought, well, maybe I'll be an English professor, or, maybe I'll go study politics and get into politics. So I think I sort of dabbled in a lot of different things just from this is something that interests me. But it wasn't until later that I really developed a sharper focus of what might be the right path for me.
So I guess with your parents both having been in corporate professional settings, it's interesting that wasn't the obvious path of, okay, I'm going to commute into the city and have the location, the environment dictate. It's interesting, the English professor or...
Probably would have been an English professor at Columbia or a mayor in New York City. I mean, I definitely was drawn to New York. I remember being in awe of the city. And, and I remember coming to work with both of them and just thinking, this is so cool. The energy of the city and the crowds of people moving through Midtown.
Anything could happen, right? The possibility.
Totally. And I remember them, taking me by the hand, and we'd be crossing the street and, just thinking, how do they know when to walk? I was so impressed by them. But to a little kid, it's like, wow, this is so cool.
Education, it sounds like, was such an important thread to, certainly to your mother, clearly to your father, and how that was instilled in you and your sister's upbringing. So at what stage were you thinking about your path to undergraduate, and then how and when did law school come into play?
Yeah. So I was not the type of kid who devoted a lot of time and energy in high school to, I have to get into X, Y, or Z school for college. As I said, I loved New York City, and we had done the typical college tour looking at colleges, mostly in the Northeast. I didn't want to venture too far away. My dad had gone to Villanova, so he made sure that we checked out Villanova. I know, Laura, that's something you can appreciate.
Proud alum.
That's right. And so we walked onto the Columbia campus, and I just knew immediately that was where I wanted to be.
Isn't that amazing how it can just hit you like that? Right.
Absolutely. Just felt like the right place and where I was meant to be, and applied and was fortunate to be admitted, and off I went to Columbia.
And what did you choose to study while you were there?
I was a political science major there. I remember arriving from, again, the public school system in Rockland County and feeling all of a sudden like the little fish in the big pond. A lot of these kids came from very prestigious private schools. They came from boarding schools. And back at Tappan Zee High School, I had been sort of a known achiever and somebody who the faculty knew, and I was a class leader. And now all of a sudden I got to Columbia and really felt, gosh, do I belong here? And what have I done coming here? And all of a sudden was sort of concerned about whether I was going to be able to go toe-to-toe with some of these kids and keep up with them. And I remember freshman year in particular, I would sit in class, and they just had a framework and a vocabulary that I did not have coming out of the public schools. They had been exposed to more sophisticated curriculum. They had probably gone through more rigorous preparation for undergraduate study. So I would just write down words that they used that I didn't know what those words meant. And I would go back to my dorm after class and look them up in the dictionary and make myself like vocabulary flashcards. And by sophomore year, all of a sudden, I started feeling more confident. Right. And I was able to sort of converse in a way that was a little bit more on par with what I was hearing from my peers, because the ideas were always there, but I just didn't necessarily have the right vocabulary. And I think so often today when we talk about providing opportunities to people, whether that's, because of where you went to school or what part of the country you grew up in or your family background, whatever it may be, it's really about unlocking people's potential by giving them the right cultural capital and vocabulary to engage with people. And, no more talented than they are, aren't necessarily, smarter than they are or more capable. So that was a huge lesson that I took away from the Columbia experience.
That's unbelievable, because you could have easily thrown in the towel and just said, look, I don't think this is the right place for me.
That's right. I'm going to transfer somewhere where I feel more comfortable.
Right. Okay. All right. So then what did you study? Did you study politics the whole way through?
I studied political science as my major.
Yep.
Really a focus on U.S. politics, which is still something that I'm passionate about, and with a little bit of U.S. history sort of sprinkled in, because I think those two things really go hand in hand.
Absolutely.
And in the course of doing that, there was a professor who taught law school style classes. And what that really meant was, in lieu of traditional texts, you were reading case law the way you do in law school. And so I remember reading a couple of cases. They were constitutional law cases about, and I don't know if you've ever read constitutional law cases, but
I have not.
If you want to have goosebumps,
probably won't start now.
Well, you may. I would recommend.
Okay.
And I can send you some particularly,
I am curious,
evocative ones.
Okay.
That will really give you goosebumps, I think, around, what does it mean to be an American? What are the rights that we enjoy? What is that uniquely American brand of liberty? And how do our institutions protect that uniquely American brand of liberty and protect us, frankly? And so reading those cases, they're written so poetically. I mean, it's not dry legal language by any means. And I just really fell in love with it. And so decided I'm going to go to law school. I'm going to immerse myself more deeply in the law and in constitutional law in particular.
Okay.
And so it was off to Cornell Law School.
Right. So you went immediately.
I went straight through.
Post-undergrad. And then when you got to law school, was there a particular area of the law that you were focused on?
So Cornell, being up in Ithaca, New York, is a little bit different than some of the law schools that are based in cities, where in the city they can really pull actively practicing attorneys to serve as adjunct faculty, and they do that. And so when you have practicing attorneys as the faculty, there's a little bit more of a practicality to the education. At a place like Cornell, and probably even at Yale, despite its location in New Haven, it's more of an academic bent, right? So you really are immersing yourself in
like
that
concepts.
And the constitutional type law analysis more so than you are in, how to negotiate a merger. Which is probably a course that a deal lawyer in New York City might teach if he's teaching at NYU Law School at night.
Absolutely.
And so it was great. I mean, I enjoyed it very much philosophically, but there was sort of this looming specter in the background of, well, we're not going to all sit in a circle and talk about the Constitution for the next 30 years after we graduate. So what is it that we are going to do? And big law is the funnel that really, the centrifugal force of that funnel, you start to feel pretty strongly as you make your way through law school at a place like Cornell. And so almost out of concern to resist that funnel, which was so effectively pulling everybody in, I sort of dove into that funnel and said, okay, well, big law, I guess, is what you do next. There are people who go to law school because they dream about working in big law. That was not it for me at all. It was really more, I'm interested in the law. I'm interested in these constitutional issues and public policy. And who knows if I'll even practice law. I want to study this stuff and then see where it goes. But lo and behold, the funnel sucked me in.
So then where did that lead you?
So by the summer of 2009, that led me to a position as a summer associate at a law firm here in New York called McDermott, Will & Emery. This would have been the first summer after the Lehman bankruptcy and other related events in September of 2008. And I remember walking into the internship and having that sense that everyone's trying to put on a happy face, but there is some dire stuff going on here.
Wow. You got that sense
immediately. There were junior attorneys packing up their desks. They had been laid off. We were sort of there, they had planned our summer before the implications of the crisis were clear. So they're taking 30 of us to, a suite at Yankee Stadium and to a steak dinner and all of that sort of pre-financial crisis whining and dining type stuff. But against the backdrop of, the lead partner of the office calling, an all-office meeting to which we were invited to sort of almost do deep breathing exercises. I mean, I remember him saying to the room, okay, we're all going to take a deep breath together. Because I think that there was just such a sense of what's going to happen.
Heightened anxiety.
Yes. And
that's great leadership.
Great meeting. And I remember that meeting to this day.
Know.
And he said, well, the first thing we're going to do is we're all going to take a deep breath together. And you had, 150, however many very high-strung attorneys sitting there, from very junior people to themselves, very seasoned partners, and everybody took a deep breath. And then he basically said, we're going to be okay. And so it was my very first lesson in what does that sort of crisis leadership look like and how important it is. And this is something that Greg Fleming has spoken about, to be aware that when you're the leader, people are watching not only what you say, but your body language how you walk into a room, how you address the team, all of those things are part of your leadership.
Couldn't be more true. Wow.
So we make our way through that summer. And there was an employee benefits and compensation partner who was based in New York, who seemed like he was buried, despite that everyone else is getting laid off. This guy seemed buried. And I clicked with him. And so I sort of volunteered and said, do you need an associate? And he said yes. And so that was the way I sort of tried to seize the opportunity to secure, more definite employment that summer of 2009.
Good for you. Always industrious. Nothing about this surprises me. Okay, so then you go and work for him full time.
Yes, I go and work for him full time for 4 years.
Yeah.
And then I got a call one day, these headhunters who just call associates all day long. And it was about an executive compensation position at a law firm called Kirkland & Ellis, which within transactional law is the top tier. I thought, gosh, I don't see that happening. I'm sure, they're not going to hire me, but let me just go for the interview. It was one of those, the interview will be good experience, if nothing else, right? Yeah. And so I walked into the Kirkland office and was blown away by the intensity, the energy. These were clearly champions in their field, people who were working as hard as people could work to make stuff happen. And I just remember being sort of in awe there, just taking it all in, even as I was waiting for the interview.
Just like sitting in the reception area.
Totally.
Yeah.
And the interview turned out to go well. And I was offered the position, took it, and spent 2 years then at Kirkland, really working around the clock for 2 years on a variety of different private equity deals, public company deals. We were the executive compensation group, but that group was almost entirely devoted to supporting the mergers and acquisition practice at Kirkland. So it was a great experience at Kirkland. Learned a lot about private equity there. And then I got a call from McDermott, the firm where I had started, and they were hiring a new partner who specialized in representing individual executives. So up to this point, I really was on the company side.
Yeah.
Now it was going to be a chance to go to the other side of the table and take what I had learned in representing individual executives. That was great. He had a bit of a subspecialty in financial services executives. That was the first time I had any sort of concentrated exposure to financial services at all.
Yeah.
Many of the deals I had worked on were consumer products, food and beverage. If I had thought about going in-house, it would have been in those sectors.
Right.
But this gentleman, represented a lot of financial services executives, one of whom was Greg Fleming. And so that was how I got to know Greg. I worked on the transaction that led to the formation of Rockefeller Capital Management, and we just clicked. And so we closed the deal in March of 2018, as you know. We had signed the deal in the fall of 2017. And in that interim period, I had made partner at McDermott, but I knew that was the finish line for me in big law.
How long had you been back at McDermott for?
About 18 months.
18 months. Okay. All right. You reach kind of the pinnacle of success and you think,
this is the beginning of a new journey if I'm staying in big law, right? I've now crossed that finish line to make partner.
Yeah.
But at that point, now you're really back on the bottom of the totem pole of the partners. And it's sort of, do you want to build a practice and, start your journey to being a more senior partner and everything that entails, which is itself, sometimes a long road. So for me, I knew that I wanted to be part of a team. In a law firm, you have collegiality, you have partnership, but you don't really have teamwork the way I define teamwork, where it's a group of people who are united behind sort of a common goal and are pushing that boulder up the hill day in and day out to get to a common destination. In a law firm, you represent a client, you help them achieve whatever, discrete problem they brought to you, and then you move on and they move on. You're not part of a more continuous, sustained journey over multiple years with the same group of colleagues.
Yeah, I never thought about that.
And so when I met Greg and understood a little bit from the deal about what this was going to be and the fact that it was under the Rockefeller brand, and certainly he made a huge personal impression on me, I remember thinking when the deal wrapped up, gosh, I'm kind of jealous of all the people who are going to now get to go do this with him. And we did a little bit of work for them post-closing in that spring of 2018. And then my last day at McDermott came along. I was going to go down the shore for the summer and think about what I wanted to do. So I'm packing up the car. It's the last day. I'm heading to the beach.
You
got a care in the world.
Your flip-flops
right?
in the car.
The wind in my hair. I got my sunglasses, and my cell phone rang. It was John Eisenberg, the original general counsel at Rockefeller, and he said, "Want to wish you well. I understand you're leaving the law firm. Would you want to come check out Rockefeller and maybe join the team?" I knew they were trying to build a team.
Yeah.
And a part of me thought that after my, summer of whatever I was going to be doing down the shore, I would maybe come back and see if there was going to be an opportunity, to reach out.
Yeah.
I definitely had in the back of my mind that, like I said, that this was going to be something special.
Yeah,
that was clear to me even from the deal.
Yeah.
And so lack of financial services experience or even particular interest aside, my interest was in this concept of building a business under such an iconic brand with a team that I knew, if it was a team Greg was assembling, was going to be really a special team to be a part of.
Okay, so then you land in financial services industry.
I land in financial services, yes, at Rockefeller Center.
And what was that like?
So once again, it was sort of like that first semester at Columbia where I thought, what are these people saying? And have I made a terrible mistake? And I don't know what they're talking about. And, in a law firm, you want to talk about hyper specialization. Within employee benefits and executive compensation, there are multiple specialties. And so I remember sitting at 10 Rock, our original office, right? And somebody came over to my desk and said, we need you to review this lease. And I'm thinking, lease? Where's the real estate lawyer? I don't do leases. And so I realized pretty quickly that this was going to be really about using the legal judgment that I had developed in the law firms, but applying it to the whole panoply of legal issues that a startup company is going to be dealing with, and not always having the luxury of calling in a specialist. Realizing that in a room that's filled with finance people, human capital people, sales people, business people, if you are the lawyer, whether or not it's your specialty, you still have some ability to hopefully bring good judgment to an issue that the team is dealing with and try to point things at least in the right direction, or know when it's something complicated enough with enough risk associated with it that we actually do need to go find a specialist.
Yes. Yeah. And that's where so much of the judgment, and I would say, and I think everyone would agree, you seem like you have particularly good judgment. So having that judgment to apply of knowing, okay, we've got to bring in external counsel or we've got to bring in the technical expertise.
The good thing is it's been a gradual journey, right? Think of how much the company has transformed from 2018 to now.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think if I had left the law firm and been dropped into where Rockefeller is today, that may have been more overwhelming.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah,
it was the ability to
grow
I've
with
talked
the business.
to some of our colleagues about this, right? When we started, it was sort of like, okay, we're flying a plane. We're not sure how to fly a plane, but it's a puddle jumper.
Yeah.
And then now you sort of look out the window of the plane and the plane's growing and growing and growing, but we're also becoming more experienced operators of the plane as we go.
Yeah.
So I think it's been a remarkable opportunity, not only for me personally and for others in the legal department, but for so many of us who came from either larger companies, different functions, to come into a place like this and have the opportunity to reach beyond what you would have been able to do in a bigger company.
Absolutely.
And really be part of applying judgment, experience to issues that reach beyond, whatever it was that you may have been more narrowly focused on in a prior role.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. So let's switch gears a little bit to mentors. I know, just as I've heard you talk, even outside of this podcast, about the importance of mentorship and you serving in a mentor capacity, and then certainly having been in a mentee capacity, you obviously, your relationship with Greg and kind of certain things about leadership style that attracted you to make a wholesale career change, right? So talk to us and to the listeners about what mentorship means to you and the role it's played in your career.
Sure. So I have never been one to formally seek mentors with the kind of intentionality that some people do. And some people are great at that, and it really works for them. And I think people should do what feels natural to them. But I remember when I started at the law firm, them suggesting to us, and here we were. I mean, we really were quite a sight. These first year lawyers coming in, and everybody's like clothes didn't quite fit right. Yeah. Everybody just looked like a little bit out of place, right?
Yeah, you're playing dress up in your parents' clothes.
Yes, that was what it felt like.
Yeah.
You catch your reflection in the glass and say, "Who is this person?" And so, you walk in that setting, and you're already a little bit intimidated, and then they tell you, you should knock on people's doors and ask them to take you out to coffee.
Oh my God!
And I remember thinking, there is no way I'm ever going to do that.
There's not a chance.
It was bad enough with some of these people to go to them on an actual work matter that they had assigned to you and ask them for guidance or input. I certainly was not going to be knocking on their door and asking them to take me out to coffee. But what I did find as I made my way through the law firms was there were going to be people who you click with along the way.
Yeah.
And once you have that sort of natural chemistry with somebody, it's much more authentic to me to then say, oh, we should grab a cup of coffee one day.
Right.
Or you linger a little bit after a meeting and say, when you said X, Y, and Z on the conference call, like, what were you getting at? Or what was the rationale? And people were very generous with their time when it was sort of presented to them in that way. And I have found that most people are, very eager and happy to try to train younger professionals. And I know for me now, it's one of my favorite parts of my role. And so I certainly was the beneficiary of that along the way, in the law firms. To me, moving a little bit beyond demographics to really who shares my values, who do I click with?
I like that. Yeah.
Who shares my sense of humor? You know, I mean, it's just, I think just like how you sort of choose friends in life, it's more organic.
It's more organic. Let's talk about your experience as a working mom in this industry. And for all the listeners out there, what advice do you have for other working moms?
Yep. So I have a 4-year-old son named James. I had a mom who worked a lot, and I think he's growing up a little bit with that same experience.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, it's hard sometimes when you want to be able to be fully present and there is a work obligation that you need to sacrifice some time in order to deliver at work. But at the same time, I'm realizing as he gets older that he's absorbing that in, I think, a good way. Sometimes I'll walk into my office at home and he's sitting at my chair, sort of intently focusing at the screen. And if I say, James, come on, let's go outside. He's like, no, not right now. I'm doing my work. I have to get this done first and then we can play after I'm done. So he has really sort of absorbed the concept of, you have work in your life and you have play in your life and priorities will shift.
You prioritize things differently at different times.
And so I sometimes worry, if you ever get an email, from that's just gibberish, that could be James emailing you, Laura. But it's sort of been encouraging to me to realize that when he grows up, if he's ever sitting, recording a podcast someday, 30 years from now, maybe he'll talk about, what his memories are and how it taught him that you can have work and you can have family and you can integrate the two things. Yeah. And if he's a dad someday, he'll have a model just like I have from my mom and dad for what it means to sort of devote yourself to both.
Yeah.
Now, something does have to give sometimes. And I think what has given for me is I've chosen to sacrifice more of the time for me during this season of life. I do think, there are different seasons, and in talking to a lot of the other moms at work who have young children and dads, they've said that it's hard. I mean, I think just acknowledging that it can be a challenge, especially when you're used to working a lot and just working a lot. When you're in a law firm, it stinks to miss, margarita night on Saturday, but that's really all you're missing.
Right.
And you can work until 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and it's not such a big deal.
Yeah.
It's a lot harder now when you feel like the stakes are higher when you're juggling and trying to be in two places at once, which you just have to at some point come to accept that you can't do that.
You can't do it. Exactly. All right. So what advice then do you dispense?
Or
would you dispense at this stage?
So I think advice specific to working moms would probably be dig in. Dig in. It's not going to be easy every day. When I think about the role models who I mentioned, they're doing an extraordinary job. That motivates me and inspires me that, it's a volunteer army in most cases for those of us in this profession, right? And so we've chosen jobs that are demanding.
Yep.
We've chosen to have children and to try to be, dedicated parents to those children. And so that's a tall order. But I think just digging in and recognizing that it can be done. You may not get to everything that you want to in a particular day, but over the long haul, if you sort of stick with it and do your best every day, you're probably going to end up with a career that you can be really proud of and kids who love you and who you can be really proud of.
It is a marathon, not a sprint,
That's
right?
exactly right.
So, well, what an extraordinary role model you are for James. And I can't wait to tune into his podcast 30 years from now and
you and me
reflect
both.
on that.
You and me both, Laura.
All right. So as we come to a close, Ashley, one of our favorite questions to ask that we ask of all of our guests, where can we find you Saturdays at 10 a.m.?
James and I are at swimming class on Saturdays at 10 a.m. I am trying not to knock the lifeguard over and dive into the pool every time James coughs. And then we are out for bagels where, it's so adorable to see even from 2 and 3 years old to now 4 years old, how they just blossom. And so he's placing the order, he's handing the cashier the cash, all things that I can remember doing with my dad. And I think, you mentioned the work that we've been doing at Rockefeller around AI and all this sort of cutting edge stuff. But it's a great reminder that the simplest things in life, which are often the best things in life, are constant and just sort of really continue down through the different generations. And I think we'll be there even in another 50 years from now. So,
oh my gosh, I love that. That's extraordinary. And Ashley, thank you so much for sharing your stories, all of your views, your insights, most importantly, your experiences. And thanks to everyone out there for tuning in.
Thank you so much, Laura. It's great to be with you.
Thank you for listening to Genius Loves Company. To learn more about Rockefeller Capital Management, visit rockco.com or keep up with us on LinkedIn or Instagram. This material was prepared by Rockefeller Capital Management. The views expressed of the hosts and guests in this episode are as of a particular point in time and are subject to change without notice. The views expressed by the speakers are solely their own and may differ from or conflict with those of other divisions in Rockefeller Capital Management. This information was provided for illustrative and educational purposes only. It should not be construed as an investment recommendation, investment advice, an offer of Rockefeller investment advisory or brokerage services, or a projection or illustration of the performance of any particular investment or strategy offered by Rockefeller. Forward-looking statements, including those presented herein, are inherently uncertain, as future events may differ materially from those reflected, and past performance is not a guarantee of future performance.